Welcome. Come in from wherever you've been. Set down whatever you've been carrying. This is a threshold, this moment right now. Behind you is the day with all its noise and motion and demand. Ahead of you is the night, deep and patient and willing to hold you. And here, right here at the threshold, you can pause, you can breathe, you can begin to let go. Tonight we're going to walk together through old stories, quiet stories, stories that ask nothing from you, except perhaps that you listen, and when listening becomes too much, that you simply drift away into sleep. These are tales from another time, from places where life moved more slowly, where presence was valued over achievement, where simply being was considered enough. Find your comfortable place now. Let your body settle wherever it is. Feel the surface beneath you accepting your weight without complaint, without effort. Your shoulders can drop, your jaw can soften. Even your eyes can close, if they haven't already. There's nothing you need to fix tonight. Nothing you need to solve or understand or accomplish. The world will keep turning without your help. The problems will still be there tomorrow, but tonight they can wait. Tonight is for rest, for release, for the deep restoration that comes when we finally stop trying. So breathe with me, slowly, softly. Let the day finish itself without you. Let these stories carry you gently towards sleep, like a river carries a leaf, without force, without resistance, just flowing naturally toward the sea. The first story begins in a small workshop at the edge of a village, where a potter lived and worked in ways that made no sense to anyone who watched him. There was a potter named Ichiro who had been making vessels for 30 years, bowls, cups, vases, jars, simple things for simple purposes. His work was adequate but unremarkable, functional. Nothing anyone would travel far to see or pay much to own. Ichiro knew this. He felt it in his hands every time he sat at his wheel. The clay would spin and his hands would shape it, and something useful would emerge, but it was always just that useful. Never beautiful, never transcendent, just adequate. Other potters in the region made pieces that took the breath away, glazes that seemed to hold captured light, forms that defied expectation. Ichiro had studied their techniques, tried to replicate their methods, but his work remained stubbornly ordinary. He was not bitter about this. He simply noticed it the way one might notice that it's raining or that one is getting older. It was a fact, unchangeable, and he continued working because working was what he did. Then one autumn, Ichiro's eyes began to fail. It happened gradually. Colors faded first, becoming muted, less distinct. Then details began to blur. By winter, he could barely see the clay in front of him, could only make out general shapes and shadows. He went to healers. They gave him herbs, performed rituals, offered prayers. Nothing helped. By spring, Ichiro was nearly blind. He could see light and dark, could make out movement, but details were gone. The world had become a soft, indistinct blur. Most potters would have stopped working. How can you throw a pot if you can't see the clay? How can you apply glaze if you can't see where you're applying it? But Ichiro had been throwing pots for 30 years. His hands knew what to do. So he continued. He worked differently now. Where before he had relied on his eyes to judge thickness, now he relied on his fingers, feeling the clay, sensing where it was too thick or too thin. Where before he had watched the form emerge, now he felt it emerge, his hands reading the clay like fingers reading text written in raised dots. The first pieces he made in darkness were disasters, uneven, collapsed, malformed. He would reach to remove them from the wheel and find that what he thought was a bowl was actually a shapeless lump. His hands had lied to him, or he had misunderstood their messages. But he kept working. What else was there to do? He threw pot after pot, learning a new language, the language of touch, of pressure, of subtle variations in temperature and texture that told him what the clay was doing. Months passed. His hands became more sensitive. He could feel things he had never felt before: the grain of the clay, the moisture content, the precise moment when it was ready to be shaped versus when it needed to rest. Working in darkness, or what felt like darkness, his other senses sharpened. He could hear the clay, the way it whispered when it was too dry, the way it sighed when it was perfect. One evening, after hours at the wheel, Ichiro lifted a pot he had just finished and carried it to his drying shelf. His neighbor, who had come to bring him food, watched this. "Ichiro," the neighbor said, "may I see what you made?" Ichiro handed over the pot. The neighbor held it up to the fading light, turning it, examining it. There was a long silence. "Ichiro," the neighbor finally said, his voice strange, "this is beautiful." "What?" "This pot. I've never seen you make anything like this. The form is perfect. The walls are impossibly thin. And the way it feels in the hands, it's as if it wants to be held. As if it was made for holding." Ichiro took the pot back, running his fingers over it, trying to understand what the neighbor was talking about. To him it felt like all his other pots, just clay shaped into a useful form. But over the following weeks, other people said the same thing. The pots he made now were different, better, much better. People started coming to his workshop specifically to buy them. They paid more than they had ever paid for his work before. Ichiro didn't understand. He was working in darkness. He couldn't see what he was making. How could his work be better? One day, a famous potter from the capital came to visit. He had heard about Ichiro's recent work and wanted to see for himself. He spent an afternoon in the workshop, watching Ichiro work, examining the finished pieces. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know what you're doing differently? I can't see." Ichiro said simply, "Yes, but that's not the difference. The difference is that you're not trying anymore." "Not trying?" "For years, I imagine you tried to make beautiful pots. You watched other potters, studied their techniques, attempted to replicate their success. But trying creates tension. Tension in the body, tension in the clay. The pot becomes a battleground between what you want it to be and what the clay wants to become." The famous potter picked up one of Ichiro's recent pieces, a simple tea bowl. "But now you can't see the finished product. You can't judge it while you're making it. You can't compare it to some ideal in your mind. You can only be present with the clay, feeling it, responding to it, allowing it to become what it wants to become. And the result is this pure form, uncontaminated by intention." Ichiro sat with this. "So my blindness is a gift. Your blindness has removed your seeing, and your seeing was your obstacle." The famous potter left, and Ichiro continued working. But now he understood something he hadn't before. All those years of adequate work, of trying to make something beautiful, of striving for perfection, all of that had been in the way. The clay had always known what to become, he just hadn't been listening. Now, in darkness, he finally could. Years passed. Ichiro's work became renowned throughout the region. People said his pots had a quality that couldn't be explained, a presence, as if they contained something more than just empty space. Students came to learn from him. He would tell them, "Close your eyes, Feel the clay. Don't try to make anything. Just listen to what the clay wants to become and help it get there. Most students found this frustrating. They wanted techniques, instructions, methods. They wanted to learn how to make pots as beautiful as Ichiro's. But Ichiro had no techniques to teach because he didn't know what he was doing. He just did it. One student, more persistent than the others, stayed for a year. Every day he would sit at the wheel with his eyes closed, trying to feel what Ichiro felt, trying to listen to the clay. For months his work was terrible, but slowly, gradually, he began to understand. It wasn't about technique. It wasn't about skill. It was about surrender, about letting go of the idea of what the pot should be and allowing it to become what it wanted to be. One day, this student made a bowl that Ichiro, running his fingers over it, recognized immediately as real work, true work. "You've learned," Ichiro said. "What have I learned? That you are not the potter. You are just the hands through which pottery happens." The student stayed another month, then returned to his home village. He set up his own workshop, and his pots, like Ichiro's, had that same inexplicable quality, that same presence. Ichiro continued working into his old age. His body grew weaker, his movements slower, but his work remained pure. Each pot was complete in itself, exactly what it needed to be, nothing more, nothing less. One morning he sat at his wheel as usual, his hands on a fresh lump of clay. He centered it, opened it, began to pull up the walls. His hands moved with their usual certainty, their usual grace. But halfway through, something happened. His hands stopped, not because he willed them to stop, but because they simply stopped, as if they had forgotten what came next. He sat there, hands on the unfinished pot, waiting for the knowing to return. But it didn't. His hands had nothing more to say. He understood. He stood slowly, his old knees creaking, and walked out of his workshop. He walked through his garden, feeling his way along familiar paths, and sat down on a bench beneath a persimmon tree. The afternoon sun was warm on his face. He could feel its presence, if not its brightness. Birds called from the trees around him. A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. He sat there for a long time, his hands resting in his lap, those hands that had shaped so much clay, that had learned to see in darkness, that had finally understood that they were not making pottery but allowing pottery to be made through them. And as he sat, he felt the same dissolution that happened with his pots on the wheel, the boundaries softening, the sense of being Ichiro fading, just hands, just breath, just this moment, complete and sufficient. When they found him the next morning, he was still sitting on the bench, his face peaceful, his hands resting open in his lap as if they had just released something and were waiting to receive something else. But there was nothing more to release and nothing more to receive. They carried him to the temple and cremated him, and his ashes were mixed with clay and made into a single large pot that sat in the village square. People would pass it and run their hands over its surface, feeling the smoothness, the perfect form, and they would remember the blind potter who had finally learned to see when he could no longer look. The workshop was left as it was, with unfinished pots on the shelves, tools hanging on the walls, the wheel waiting. Sometimes young potters would come and sit there, close their eyes, and try to feel what Ichiro had felt. Most couldn't, but a few could, and those few carried forward the teaching that couldn't be taught, that the highest skill is the skill of getting out of the way, that the greatest art is the art of allowing, that mastery is not about control but about surrender to what wants to emerge. And somewhere downstream from where the mountains released their water, there was a river, and beside that river there was a man who had devoted his life to watching it. His name was Makoto, though the villagers called him the river guardian, which made him smile because he wasn't guarding the river. The river needed no guarding. If anything, the river was guarding him, teaching him, showing him things he could learn nowhere else. Makoto had built a small hut on the riverbank 20 years ago. Before that, he had been a merchant in the capital, successful and wealthy, constantly moving, constantly acquiring, constantly planning 3 steps ahead. But something had happened, or perhaps nothing had happened, which was itself the problem, and one day he had simply walked away from it all. He had walked and walked until he came to this river, and when he saw it moving with such constancy, such presence, he knew he had found his teacher. He built the hut and stayed. Every morning, Makoto would sit on a flat rock by the river's edge and watch the water flow past. He didn't meditate in any formal way. He didn't analyze or philosophize. He just watched. The water moved, and he watched it move. That was all. At first, his mind resisted this simplicity. It wanted to make the watching into something more sophisticated, more important. It generated questions. What is the river teaching me? What insight am I supposed to gain? How long do I need to do this before I achieve enlightenment? But the river had no answers to these questions. It simply flowed, and gradually, over months and years, Makoto's questions faded. He stopped trying to learn something and simply watched. And in the watching, without trying, he began to understand. He understood that the river never held onto water. Each drop that passed him would never pass him again. The river was constantly losing everything it was, and yet it remained a river, complete, sufficient, never diminished by the endless letting go. He understood that the river never forced its way. When it encountered a rock, it flowed around it. When the bank was high, it stayed low. When given a cliff, it fell. It followed the path of least resistance, and yet it could, over centuries, carve through mountains. He understood that the river had no future and no past. It was only ever now. The water upstream was not yet the river. The water downstream was no longer the river. The river existed only in this moment, this flowing, this immediate presence. These understandings were not thoughts. They were more like feelings, knowings that lived in his body rather than his mind. He could not have explained them to anyone, but he felt them deeply, and they changed how he moved through his days. Villagers would sometimes come to visit him, curious about this strange man who lived alone by the river, watching water. They would ask him questions. What have you learned? What is the secret? How can I find peace? Makoto would always give the same answer. Sit, watch the river. Most found this frustrating. They wanted wisdom in words, techniques they could apply, practices they could perform. But Makoto had no words to give them. Only the river had words, and its words were not words but flowing, and either you heard that or you didn't. One spring, after heavy rains in the mountains, the river began to swell. The water rose higher than Makoto had ever seen it, brown and turbulent, carrying broken branches and debris. It rose to within a few feet of his hut, then higher still. Makoto watched it rise. He felt no fear, no urgency to save his possessions or flee to higher ground. The river was doing what rivers do. He sat on his rock, now surrounded by water, and watched. The water rose until it reached the floor of his hut. Then it rose higher, entering the hut, soaking his sleeping mat, his few possessions, his stores of food. Still Makoto sat and watched. A farmer from the village, seeing the rising water, came running to warn him. "Makoto, the river is flooding. You must leave. Your hut will be destroyed." Makoto looked at the farmer with calm eyes. "Yes, perhaps it will. Then come, save yourself. Save your things. The river is not trying to destroy anything. It's just flowing. My hut is in its way, so the water goes through it. That's all. But everything you own." "I own nothing. These things were loaned to me by the world. Now the world is taking them back. That's fine." The farmer stared at him, unable to comprehend this attitude. "You're mad, perhaps." The water rose for another hour, and then it crested and began to recede. By evening, the river had returned to its normal banks. Makoto's hut was destroyed, walls collapsed, roof sagging, everything inside ruined or swept away. Makoto walked through the wreckage, picking up what remained. His sleeping mat was gone. His bowl was gone. His spare robe was torn and muddy. Nearly everything was gone. He gathered the few things that were salvageable and sat down on his rock. The river flowed past, calm again, clear again, as if the flood had never happened. He watched the water and felt something shift in his chest. Not sadness at the loss, but something else. Lightness, freedom. All those things he had thought he needed. The hut he had thought was his home. The possessions he had thought were important. All of it had been swept away, and he was still here, still breathing, still watching the river, still complete. He understood then what the river had been teaching him all along. Let go. Let it all go. Nothing is yours to keep. Everything is always flowing away, and trying to hold on is suffering. Letting go is freedom. He laughed then, sitting on his rock in his torn robe, looking at his destroyed hut. He laughed at himself, at his attachment, at the illusion that he had ever owned anything at all. The farmer, returning to check on him, found him laughing and shook his head, definitely mad. But Makoto wasn't mad, he was awake. For the first time in his life, perhaps, truly awake. He did not rebuild the hut. Instead, he found a large tree with spreading branches near the river's edge and made his home there, in the open, protected only by leaves. He owned one robe, one bowl, and nothing else. When it rained, he got wet. When it was cold, he was cold. When it was hot, he sought shade. And he continued to watch the river, learning the same lesson again and again. The only lesson there was, let go, let go, let go. Years passed. Makoto grew older, thinner, more weathered. He became part of the landscape, as much a feature of the river as the rocks and trees. Birds would land near him without fear. Deer would come to drink while he sat. He had become so still, so empty of intention, that animals recognized him as no threat. One summer, a young woman came to the river. She was carrying a heavy grief. Her child had died, and she could not accept it, could not let it be real. The pain was crushing her, and she had heard of the river guardian who lived by the water and who, people said, understood something about loss. She found Makoto sitting on his rock, watching the water. She stood a little distance away, unsure how to approach, unsure what to say. Makoto turned and looked at her. He could see the grief on her face, in her posture, in the way she held her body, as if trying to keep something in. "Come," he said gently. "Sit." She sat beside him on the rock. They watched the river together in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "They said you could help me. I can't help you." "Then why did you tell me to sit?" "Because sitting is better than running, and the river might help you. even if I cannot." She didn't understand, but she stayed. What else was there to do? She watched the water flow past, brown and smooth, carrying leaves and foam and small fish darting in the shallows. After a while, Makoto said, "Do you see that leaf?" She looked where he pointed. A leaf was drifting past, spinning slowly in the current. "Yes, watch it." She watched. The leaf floated downstream, moving with the current, turning, dipping, rising. She watched until it disappeared around a bend. "It's gone," she said. "Yes." "And did the river try to hold on to it?" "No." "Did the river grieve when it disappeared?" "No." The river lets everything go. Every drop of water, every leaf, every fish, every bit of foam. It lets it all go, constantly. And yet the river is not diminished. It remains a river. Do you understand? She thought she might. "You're saying I should let go of my grief? Just let my child go?" "I'm saying the river doesn't hold on, and it doesn't diminish. You're holding on, and it's crushing you. The grief is a river, and you're trying to dam it, to keep it still, to preserve it because you think letting it flow away would mean forgetting, would mean your child didn't matter. But holding grief is not honoring, it's drowning." Tears came then, hard and heavy. She cried for a long time, and Makoto sat beside her, saying nothing, just present. The river flowed past, indifferent to her tears, and somehow that indifference was a comfort. The river didn't care about her pain, didn't try to fix it, didn't offer false comfort. It just flowed. When her tears slowed, she felt different, not better, exactly. The pain was still there, but it felt less solid, less permanent, more like water than stone. She came back many times over the following months. Each time, she would sit and watch the river with Makoto. He never offered advice, never tried to explain or comfort. He just sat with her and watched the water flow. Gradually, she learned what he had learned, that holding on increases suffering, that letting go is not forgetting, that grief, like water, needs to flow, and when you let it flow, it carries away the crushing weight and leaves behind something softer, something that can be lived with. She never stopped missing her child. The love never diminished, but the pain transformed from something that drowned her into something that flowed through her, touching everything but crushing nothing. She returned to her village, to her life, to her remaining children and her husband. But she was different now. She had learned from the river, and the river had taught her what it taught everyone who truly watched it. Nothing lasts, everything flows. Let go, let go, let go. Makoto continued sitting by the river. More people came, some seeking wisdom, some seeking comfort, some just seeking silence. He treated them all the same, gesturing to the rock, inviting them to sit, pointing to the river. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves were turning and the air was cooling, Makoto sat on his rock and felt a deep tiredness. Not the tiredness of exertion, but the tiredness of completion. He had sat here for 20 years. He had watched the river for 20 years. He had learned what the river had to teach, or at least learned it as well as a person could learn it. He looked at the water flowing past, and he understood that he too was flowing, had always been flowing, and that the time had come to let go of even this sitting, this watching, this body that had been his boat for these years. He stood slowly and walked to the water's edge. He removed his robe, folded it neatly on the rock, and walked into the river. The water was cold, but not unpleasantly so. He walked until it reached his waist, then his chest. He stood there, feeling the current pressing against him, trying to move him downstream. He didn't resist. He leaned into the current, let his feet lift from the bottom, and began to flow. The river carried him downstream gently, as if he were just another leaf, another bit of foam. He floated on his back, looking up at the sky, at the trees passing overhead, and he felt no fear, no regret, no clinging to life. He was just flowing, going where the river went, becoming part of it finally and completely. A fisherman found his body caught in the reeds downstream the next morning. They carried it back to the village and cremated it, and his ashes were scattered in the river, where they dissolved and flowed and became part of everything the river touched: the banks, the fish, the trees, the soil, the people who drank from it, all of it connected, all of it flowing, nothing separate, nothing permanent, everything always letting go and always being received. The rock where Makoto had sat remained empty for a while. Then someone else began sitting there, watching the river, learning the same lessons. And after them, someone else. The rock was never empty for long. The river kept flowing, kept teaching, kept showing anyone willing to watch that the only way to live without drowning is to flow, is to let go, is to trust that the current knows where it's going even when you don't. And in a city where merchants traded silk and spices and the streets hummed with the constant noise of buying and selling, there lived a man named Daichi who had made his fortune counting things. He counted ships in the harbor. He counted bolts of cloth in warehouses. He counted coins, crates, sacks of grain, barrels of oil. His mind was sharp, his memory precise, and his services were in constant demand among merchants who needed to know exactly what they had and exactly what they owed. Daichi was wealthy. He lived in a fine house with servants and gardens. He wore silk robes and ate well. By all external measures, he was successful. But inside, he felt a growing emptiness, a sense that counting things was no kind of life at all, that he had spent 30 years tracking the movement of objects and had never once stopped to notice his own life moving past him. One evening, after a particularly long day of inventory at the docks, Daichi walked home through the city streets. The sun was setting, and the sky was on fire, orange and pink and purple, clouds lit from below like embers. He stopped walking and looked up at the sky, really looked at it, perhaps for the first time in years. And standing there, neck craned, watching the light shift and change, he had a strange thought. I wonder how many colors there are in that sky right now. He tried to count them: orange, pink, purple, red, yellow. But where did orange end and pink begin? Where did pink become purple? The colors bled into each other, and he couldn't count them because they weren't separate things. They were a continuum, infinite gradations, uncountable. He stood there trying to count colors until the sun set and the sky went dark, and then he looked up at the emerging stars and thought, I wonder how many stars there are. He knew, of course, that people had tried to count stars, that astronomers had catalogs and charts. But standing there, looking up at the vast spray of light across the darkness, he understood that you couldn't really count them. You could number them, perhaps, but counting implied knowing each one individually, and there were too many. They were too far, too faint, and new ones were always appearing as your eyes adjusted to the darkness. Daichi walked home slowly, his mind circling these thoughts. He had spent his life counting things, but he had only been able to count things that were separate, discrete, countable, bolts of cloth, sacks of grain, things with clear boundaries. But what about things without boundaries? What about colors in a sunset? What about stars? What about moments? Could you count moments? Where did one moment end and another begin? That night, lying in his bed, Daichi couldn't sleep. His mind, trained for 30 years to count and catalog, kept reaching for things to count and kept finding things that couldn't be counted. His breaths, where did one breath end and another begin? His heartbeats, could you count them? You could try, but you'd lose count, you'd lose track, and besides, you'd be dead before you finished. He lay there in the darkness, his mind churning, and somewhere around midnight, something broke, or perhaps something opened. He stopped trying to count, stopped trying to pin things down, and just lay there, breathing, his heart beating, the moments passing, all of it uncountable, all of it infinite, all of it utterly beyond his mind's ability to contain or control. He laughed then, alone in his bed, laughed at himself, at the absurdity of spending 30 years counting things as if counting mattered, as if knowing how many bolts of cloth sat in a warehouse had anything to do with being alive. The next morning, he didn't go to the docks. He walked instead to the edge of the city, to a hill that overlooked the ocean. He sat on the grass and looked out at the water, and he tried to count the waves. 1, 2, 3. But where did one wave end and another begin? They merged, overlapped, arose from the same water. He couldn't count them. They were uncountable. He sat there all day, watching waves, and evening came. The sun began to set, and he watched the colors again, trying to count them, failing again, and this time when he failed, he smiled. Days passed, weeks. Daichi stopped going to the docks. He stopped counting inventories. He spent his days on the hill, or walking through the city, or sitting in his garden, trying to count things that couldn't be counted. Leaves on a tree, but they moved in the wind, they overlapped, and besides, new ones were always growing. People passing in the street, but they weren't discrete units. They were people, unique, each containing infinite complexity. How could you reduce them to a number? His business suffered. His clients complained. His reputation began to shift from reliable to unreliable, from precise to imprecise, from valuable to eccentric. Daichi didn't care. He had spent 30 years counting countable things, and it had brought him wealth but no joy, security but no peace. Now he was counting uncountable things, and it brought him no wealth and no security. But for the first time in his life, he felt awake. One evening, sitting on his hill watching the sunset, a young merchant found him. The merchant was angry. "Daichi, you were supposed to inventory my warehouse 3 days ago. I've been waiting. I need those numbers." Daichi looked at him calmly. "How many colors in the sky right now?" "What? Count them. How many colors?" The merchant looked at the sky, confused and irritated. "I don't know. 5? 6? What does this have to do with my warehouse? Count them precisely. Tell me where orange ends and pink begins." "This is ridiculous. I came here for..." "You came here for numbers, but numbers are lies. They make things seem separate when everything is connected. They make things seem countable when everything is infinite." The merchant stared at him. "You've gone mad. Perhaps. Or perhaps I've finally come to my senses." The merchant left, muttering about finding a new accountant. Daichi returned to watching the sunset. The colors shifted, blended, and he stopped trying to count them. He just watched, just present, just here with the infinite, uncountable beauty of light moving through air. More clients left. Daichi's wealth began to diminish. He sold his fine house, let his servants go, moved to a small room above a noodle shop. He owned one robe, one bowl, and a mat to sleep on. Nothing else. And he was happier than he had ever been. Every evening, he would climb his hill and watch the stars emerge. He had given up trying to count them. Instead, he would pick one star and watch it, just that one, really seeing it, noticing how it twinkled, how its light seemed to pulse, how it sat in relation to the stars around it. He would watch that one star until he felt he understood it, not as a number or a catalog entry, but as a presence, a being, something that existed not to be counted but to be witnessed. People in the city heard about the crazy ex-merchant who sat on a hill counting stars. Some thought him mad, others thought him holy. A few, the ones who were also searching, came to sit with him. One evening, a young woman climbed the hill and sat beside him. She had heard he was a wise man, a teacher. She had questions about the meaning of life, about purpose, about how to live. Daichi listened to her questions, then pointed at the sky. "Pick a star, any star." She looked up, picked one, that one. "Watch it. For how long? Until you understand." "Understand what?" "You'll know." She sat with him and watched her star. At first, she was impatient, restless. This seemed pointless, but she stayed because she had nowhere else to go, no other teacher to turn to. She watched her star. Minutes passed, an hour. The star didn't change, it just existed, twinkling faintly, distant and indifferent. And gradually, something shifted in her. She stopped waiting for understanding to arrive. She stopped trying to figure out what she was supposed to learn. She just watched the star, and in the watching, she became quiet. Her mind, usually so busy, so full of questions and worries and plans, grew still, and in that stillness, she understood. Not with her mind, but with something deeper. The star wasn't there to be understood. It was there to be witnessed. And she wasn't there to achieve something or become something. She was there to witness, to be present, to be here, now, watching light that had traveled unimaginable distances just to reach her eyes in this moment. When she finally looked away from the star, there were tears on her face. She turned to Daichi. "Thank you," she said. "I taught you nothing. You taught me to stop counting." He smiled. "Yes, that's everything." She came back many times, and others came too. They would sit with Daichi on the hill, watching stars, learning to stop counting, learning to stop trying to pin down and possess and understand, learning just to be present with the infinite. Daichi grew old. His body weakened, his eyes grew dim, but his practice deepened. Every night, weather permitting, he would climb his hill and watch stars. And when the weather didn't permit, when clouds covered the sky, he would sit anyway, watching the darkness, counting nothing, just present. One winter night, clear and cold, Daichi climbed his hill for the last time. He sat in his usual spot, looked up at the stars, and felt his body failing. His heart was tired. His breath was shallow. He knew this was his last night. He chose one star, bright and clear near the horizon. He watched it with complete attention, complete presence. And as he watched, he felt himself dissolving, the boundaries between himself and the star fading. He was watching the star. He was the watching. He was the star. All of it one thing, infinite and uncountable and utterly sufficient. His breath slowed, his heart slowed, and somewhere in the watching, in the dissolving, he stopped, gently, quietly, just stopped. They found him the next morning, sitting on the hill, his face turned up to the sky, his eyes open, frost on his eyelashes. He looked like he was still watching the stars, and in a way, perhaps he was. Perhaps he had become what he watched, infinite and distant and eternally present. They carried him down the hill and cremated him, and his ashes were scattered on the hillside where he had sat for so many years. Grass grew through them, and flowers, and people continued to climb the hill to watch stars, and some of them would sit where Daichi had sat and feel something they couldn't name, a presence, a teaching, a whisper that said, "Stop counting, stop grasping, stop trying to contain the infinite. Just watch, just be, just this, always this, enough." And deep in the mountains, along a path that few remembered and fewer traveled, there stood a temple that had no name. It had once had a name, centuries ago, but the name had been forgotten. The monks who founded it had died. The records had been lost to fire or flood, or simply the slow erosion of time. And now it was just there, a collection of wooden buildings slowly returning to the forest, tended by no one, visited by almost no one, waiting. The temple had a peculiar feature. In its main hall, there was a wall covered with small wooden plaques, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each plaque bore a name carved in careful characters. Names of monks who had lived there, perhaps, or names of benefactors, or names of the dead, memorialized. No one knew anymore. A wandering monk named Satoshi came upon the temple one autumn afternoon. He was old, far from home, and tired from walking. He saw the buildings through the trees and decided to rest there for the night. He entered the main hall and saw the wall of names. He stood before it, looking at the plaques, reading the names. Hundreds of names, thousands of names, each one representing a person who had lived, who had mattered to someone, who had left enough of a mark that their name was carved in wood and placed on this wall. But Satoshi didn't recognize a single name, not one. All these people who had been important enough to memorialize, and they were completely forgotten. Their names meant nothing. They were just characters carved in wood. He sat down before the wall and felt a deep sadness. All these lives, all this effort to be remembered, and it had all come to nothing. The temple had no name. The people had no memory. Just wooden plaques on a wall in a forgotten temple in the mountains. He sat there for a long time, looking at the names, thinking about his own life, his own name when he died. Would anyone remember him? Would anyone carve his name on a plaque? And if they did, how long before that plaque too meant nothing to anyone? Night came. Satoshi lit no lamp. He just sat in the darkness, surrounded by forgotten names, feeling the weight of impermanence, the absolute certainty that everyone would eventually be forgotten. But as he sat, something shifted. The sadness transformed into something else. Not happiness, exactly, but a kind of peace. If everything was forgotten, then nothing needed to be remembered. If all names eventually became meaningless, then the struggle to make a name for himself, to be important, to be remembered, all of that struggle was pointless. He could let it go. He thought about all the years he had spent trying to be a good monk, a respected monk, a monk whose teachings would be remembered and passed down, and suddenly that seemed exhausting and absurd. All those efforts to create a legacy, and for what? So his name could end up on a plaque on a wall in a forgotten temple, meaning nothing to anyone? He laughed then, in the darkness, surrounded by forgotten names. He laughed at himself, at his ambitions, at the cosmic joke of it all. We spend our lives trying to be remembered, and we're all guaranteed to be forgotten, every single one of us. The laughter faded, and he sat in silence. And in that silence, he felt a freedom he had never felt before. If he was going to be forgotten anyway, then he was free. Free to live without needing to create a legacy. Free to do good without needing recognition. Free to be present without needing to be important. He stayed at the temple, not planning to stay at first, just resting. But days passed, and he found he didn't want to leave. The temple had become his teacher. The forgotten names had become his sangha. He cleaned the hall, swept the paths, tended the buildings as best he could with his old body. And every day, he would sit before the wall of names and remember that he too would be forgotten, and that remembering this was the greatest freedom he had ever known. Sometimes travelers would pass through. He would offer them tea, a place to sleep. They would ask him about the temple, about the names on the wall. He would say he didn't know, which was true. He would say the names were forgotten, which was also true. Some travelers would become sad hearing this. How terrible to be forgotten. Satoshi would smile. Is it? To be forgotten is to be free. No one expects anything from you. No one is disappointed by you. You can simply be without the burden of memory. Most didn't understand, but a few did. Those few would stay a while, sitting before the wall of names, contemplating their own eventual forgetting, and in that contemplation, finding the same freedom Satoshi had found. Years passed. Satoshi grew older, more bent, more frail. He wondered sometimes if he would die here, in this nameless temple, and be forgotten like all the names on the wall. The thought brought him peace. One morning, a young monk arrived. He was ambitious, full of energy and plans. He had heard there was an old temple in the mountains, and thought it might be a good place to establish a practice center, to attract students, to build something meaningful. He found Satoshi sweeping leaves in the courtyard. "Old man, do you live here?" "For now. This temple, does it belong to anyone?" "It belongs to the forest." "I mean, is there an abbot? Someone in charge?" "The trees are in charge." The young monk was frustrated by these cryptic answers. "I want to restore this temple, make it beautiful again, bring people here to practice. Will you help me?" Satoshi stopped sweeping and looked at the young monk. He saw in him his younger self, ambitious, well-meaning, desperate to make a mark on the world. "Come," Satoshi said, "I'll show you something." He led the young monk to the main hall, to the wall of names. "Do you see these names?" The young monk looked. "Yes. Do you recognize any of them?" "No. Neither do I. Neither does anyone. These people built this temple, or supported it, or practiced here. They were remembered for a while, and then they were forgotten, as you will be forgotten, as I will be forgotten, as everyone is forgotten." The young monk felt anger rising. "So you're saying there's no point? We should just let the temple fall into ruin? Let everything decay?" "I'm saying the temple is already falling into ruin. That's what things do. They fall. And trying to stop them from falling is swimming against the river. You'll exhaust yourself and the river will flow anyway. Then why do you sweep the leaves? Why do you tend the buildings?" Satoshi smiled. "Because the leaves are there, because the buildings are there, not because I'm trying to preserve something or create something permanent. Just because it's what I do today. Tomorrow, I might not. Tomorrow, the temple might collapse, and that would be fine too." The young monk didn't understand. He left, shaking his head, returning to the world to find a different temple, one that would be receptive to his plans and energy. Satoshi returned to sweeping leaves. The autumn wind blew more leaves down as fast as he could sweep them. It was endless work, pointless work, perfect work. He swept until the sun set. Then he went inside, sat before the wall of names, and meditated in the darkness. Around him, hundreds of forgotten people. Ahead of him, his own forgetting. And all of it okay. All of it perfect. All of it just the way things were. Winter came. The snow was heavy that year. The temple buildings creaked under the weight. One morning, Satoshi woke to find that one of the secondary halls had collapsed during the night. Its roof caved in, its walls fallen. He looked at the wreckage and felt no sadness. The building had stood for centuries. Now it had fallen. That's what things do. He continued tending what remained, knowing it too would fall. Eventually, everything falls. Everything is forgotten. And that's not sad. That's just true. One morning, in early spring, as the snow was melting and the first flowers were pushing through the earth, Satoshi didn't wake. His old heart had stopped during the night, gently, without struggle, just stopped. His body was found by a traveling peddler who came through a week later. The peddler didn't know what to do with an old monk's body, so he covered it with flowers from the garden and continued on his way, telling people in the next village. Some villagers came and cremated Satoshi's body near the temple. They didn't know his name. He had never told anyone. So they couldn't carve a plaque for him. He joined the wall of forgotten names by being omitted from it, which seemed somehow appropriate. The temple continued to stand for a few more years. Then it too collapsed, piece by piece, building by building, until it was just some old foundation stones and the wall of names, wooden plaques slowly rotting, the characters becoming illegible, the names dissolving back into the forest. And that was fine. That was perfect. The temple had served its purpose. The names had been carved. The forgetting had happened. And somewhere in that cycle of remembering and forgetting, building and collapsing, Satoshi had found the freedom that comes from accepting that nothing lasts, that all names fade, that the struggle to be remembered is the struggle to avoid the truth. The truth is simple. You will be forgotten. And knowing this, truly knowing this, deeply accepting this, is liberation. Because once you know you'll be forgotten, you're free to live without the burden of legacy, without the pressure of importance, without the constant exhausting effort to make a mark on a world that will eventually erase all marks anyway. You're free to sweep leaves, free to sit, free to breathe, free to live this one moment fully, knowing it too will be forgotten, and that's okay. That's more than okay. That's perfect. And in a valley where the soil was poor and the winters were long, there lived a woman who planted trees. Her name was Yuki, and she had been planting trees for 40 years, not for profit, not for beauty, not for any reason she could clearly articulate. She just planted trees. Every spring, she would collect seeds from the forest acorns, pine cones, maple seeds. She would plant them in small pots, nurture them through their first delicate year, and then transplant the saplings to places where trees were needed, eroded hillsides, empty fields, the edges of the village where children played. She planted slowly. Maybe 50 trees a year, maybe fewer. At that rate, over 40 years, she had planted perhaps 2,000 trees. Many had died, some had been cut down, but many still stood, growing, thickening, spreading their roots into the earth. Yuki was old now. Her back was bent from bending. Her hands were gnarled from digging. She moved slowly through her days, planting, watering, tending. People in the village thought her a bit strange. Why spend your life planting trees? You'll never see them mature. You'll never sit in their shade or eat their fruit or benefit from their lumber. By the time these trees are big enough to matter, you'll be dead. Yuki knew this. She had always known this. She was planting trees for a time she would never see, for people she would never meet. And that was exactly the point. One day, a young boy from the village came to watch her plant a sapling. He was curious, the way children are curious about things that don't make immediate sense. "Why do you plant trees?" he asked. Yuki pressed soil around the sapling's roots, patting it gently. "Because trees are needed, but you'll never see it grow big." "No." "Then why do it?" She sat back on her heels and looked at the boy. "Come with me." She led him to the edge of the village, to a small grove of oak trees. The trees were huge, their trunks thick, their branches spreading wide, creating deep shade. Children were playing in that shade, running and laughing. "Do you know who planted these trees?" Yuki asked. The boy shook his head. "Neither do I. Someone planted them long ago. Someone who knew they would never sit in their shade. Someone who planted them anyway, for us, for you." The boy looked up at the trees, seeing them differently now. "When you're old like me," Yuki said, "those trees I'm planting now will be like these trees. They'll give shade to children you'll never meet, children who won't know who planted them, and that's fine. That's the point." The boy thought about this. "So you're planting trees for people you don't know?" "Yes." "That's nice." Yuki smiled. "It's not nice. It's just what you do. Someone planted for me. I plant for someone else. That's how it works." The boy helped her plant that day, and the next day, and the day after that. He learned to dig the hole properly, to spread the roots, to water deeply. He learned to be patient, to understand that trees grow slowly, that results take time. He grew up helping Yuki plant trees. When he was a young man, he continued the work. When Yuki grew too old to dig anymore, he did the digging while she supervised, telling him where to plant, how deep, how to care for the sapling. One spring morning, Yuki didn't come out to the planting spot. The young man, now middle-aged, went to her small house and found her in bed, very weak, very frail. "I can't plant anymore," she whispered. "That's all right. I'll plant." "Good." She closed her eyes, then opened them again. "There's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "I lied to that boy all those years ago. To you." He leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "I said I plant trees for people I don't know. But that's not true. I plant trees for you, for everyone, but mainly for you, because you're here, because you're listening, because you're learning to do what I do. I plant trees so you'll learn to plant trees. That's the real reason." He felt tears on his face. "I understand." Do you understand that the trees don't matter? The trees are beautiful, and they're useful, and they're important, but they're not the point. The point is teaching someone to care about things that will outlive them. The point is teaching patience, teaching long-term thinking, teaching that your actions matter even if you never see the results. That's what I've been planting. Not trees. You. She died that night, quietly, her planting done. The man continued the work. Every spring he planted trees, and when a young girl from the village started following him, asking questions, helping dig holes, he taught her what Yuki had taught him. "Why do you plant trees?" the girl asked one day. And he gave her the same answer Yuki had given him, knowing it was both true and not true, knowing the real answer would only become clear over years of planting, years of patience, years of doing work whose fruits you would never harvest. The trees grew, slowly, quietly. Some died, some thrived, and beneath them, invisible but real, the true planting continued, the planting of patience, of long-term thinking, of care for future generations, of understanding that the most important work is often the work whose results you never see. Decades later, when the man was old and bent like Yuki had been, he walked through the valley and saw forests where there had been empty hillsides. He saw children playing under trees he had planted 40 years ago. He saw birds nesting in branches, saw deer bedding down in the shade, saw the whole ecosystem that had grown around the work he and Yuki had done. And he understood finally what Yuki had meant. The trees were beautiful, but the real miracle was that he had learned to care about them, to dedicate his life to something that would outlive him. That was the true planting. That was what Yuki had given him. He died eventually, as everyone does, but the work continued. The girl he had taught her own children, and they taught theirs. And the valley slowly transformed from sparse and poor to lush and rich, covered with forests that no one remembered planting, that seemed to have always been there, eternal and permanent. Though nothing is permanent, though everything eventually falls and dies and returns to earth. But before the falling, there's the growing, and before the growing, there's the planting, and before the planting, there's someone who decides that it's worth planting seeds for trees they'll never sit under, for shade that will comfort strangers, for beauty that will outlive them. And that decision, that small act of faith in the future, in continuation, in the value of work that bears fruit only for others, that decision is what makes us human, what connects us across time, what allows each generation to receive the gifts of the past and pass gifts to the future. Yuki planted trees, but more than that, she planted the understanding that we are all connected, that what we do today matters tomorrow, that the future is made by the choices of the present, and that the highest work is often the work done for those we'll never meet, in a time we'll never see, for reasons that transcend our own brief lives. The trees stand, the work continues, the planting goes on. The stories are ending now, the words are slowing, the night is deep and complete. You've listened, or perhaps you've already drifted away, and either is perfect. These stories will continue without you, the way trees grow whether we watch them or not, the way rivers flow whether we listen or not. Your body is heavy now, or perhaps it's light, perhaps you can't tell anymore. Perhaps the boundary between your body and what holds it has softened, blurred, become uncertain. That's good. That's what we've been moving toward all along, the dissolving of boundaries, the letting go of separation, the understanding that you are not apart from the world but a part of it, not separate from the night but held by it, carried by it, becoming it. All the people in these stories, the potter, the river guardian, the merchant, the temple keeper, the tree planter, all of them learned the same thing, just in different ways. They learned to let go, to stop trying to control, to surrender to what is, to what flows, to what grows and dies and grows again. And you can learn that too, right now, right here, by simply letting yourself slip into sleep, by releasing your hold on waking, by trusting that sleep will hold you, will restore you, will return you in the morning, different somehow, renewed. There's nothing left to do. The day is done. The stories are done. Even these words are almost done. Just breathe now, softly, slowly. Let each breath be complete. Let each moment be sufficient. Nothing to add, nothing to change. Just this, just now. Just breath moving in and out, carrying you deeper, deeper into the stillness that has no name, the darkness that holds everything, the silence that sings without sound. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you need to be. And when morning comes, and it will come, it always comes, you'll wake, and the world will be waiting, and you'll carry with you some small seed planted by these stories, some small understanding that will grow slowly, quietly, in its own time. But that's tomorrow. Tonight is for rest, for release, for letting everything fall away until there's only this. Breathing, being, dissolving into sleep, like salt dissolving in water, like sound dissolving in silence, like everything dissolves eventually, returning to the source, becoming what we've always been. Sleep now, deeply, completely, without reservation or fear or holding on. The night is yours. The silence is yours. The rest is yours. Let go, let go, let go. And sleep